Amy Rodriguez stepped off the transport ship and felt her stomach drop as she looked at Zenthara Academy for the first time. The massive building stretched across the horizon like a small city, with towers that reached toward the purple sky of Kepler 442b. Strange lights pulsed along the walls in patterns she could not understand, and floating platforms carried students between different sections of the complex. She had seen pictures during her preparation on Earth, but nothing had prepared her for the real thing. A small device in her hand beeped and displayed a holographic map. Amy stared at it for several seconds before she figured out how to make it show her the path to the dormitories. The technology here was so advanced compared to what she knew from Earth that even simple things felt complicated. She picked up her single bag and started walking toward the main entrance. Other students moved past her with easy confidence. A group of tall blue beings with 4 arms, each glided by on what looked like water flowing beneath their feet. Their skin was almost transparent, and Amy could see strange organs pulsing inside their bodies. These had to be the Nereids that she had read about during her training. They spoke to each other in sounds like whale songs mixed with rushing water. Formation of insect-like creatures marched past in perfect formation. They were the Chitauri, Amy realized, and they moved as if controlled by one mind. Their compound eyes reflected the academy lights like mirrors, and their movements were sharp and precise. None of them looked at her as they passed. Amy tried not to stare, but everything was so different from home. Floating balls of light contained in clear suits drifted overhead. She knew these were the Luminians, beings made of pure energy that needed special containers to interact with the physical world. One of them paused near her, and she felt a warm, tingling sensation in her mind. "New student," came a voice inside, her head that sounded like static mixed with wind chimes. "Human variety. Interesting primitive biological structure." Amy did not know how to respond to a telepathic comment, so she just nodded and kept walking. The Luminian drifted away, apparently losing interest. The main entrance was huge and filled, with students from species Amy had only seen in training videos. She approached what looked like an information desk, though it was shaped like a crystal tree and operated by a being that looked like living rock. "Excuse me," Amy said. "I am looking for my room assignment." The rock creature turned toward her with a grinding sound. Its voice was deep and slow like an earthquake. "State designation and origin species for processing. Amy Rodriguez from Earth. I am part of the Human Exchange Program." The being paused for a long moment. "Human. Recent addition to Galactic Community. Dormitory assignment, Section 7, Level 12, Room 847. Your roommate designation is Resonance of Dawn Crystals of the Vorthak Collective." Amy thanked the being and followed the directions on her device through corridors that seemed to change color as she walked. Students from different species filled the hallways, but most ignored her completely. A few stared with what might have been curiosity, though it was hard to tell with faces so different from human ones. She found her room after getting lost twice and having to ask a maintenance robot for help. The door recognized her genetic signature and slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was larger than she expected, but split clearly into 2 different sections. One half looked normal enough with a bed, desk, and storage areas that seemed designed for human use. The other half was filled with crystal formations and strange geometric shapes that hummed softly. Amy set her bag on the human bed and looked around. The walls were transparent in some places, showing views of the alien landscape outside. 3 moons hung in the purple sky, and strange plants with metallic leaves swayed in the wind. It was beautiful, but felt nothing like home. A sound, like bells mixed with static, came from behind her. Amy turned to see her roommate entering the room. Resonance of Dawn crystals was about 7 feet tall and looked like a walking crystal sculpture. Light moved through her transparent body in slow waves, and her face was hard to make out behind the shifting reflections. "So you are the human assigned to this space," the Vorthak said. Her voice came from everywhere at once, created by vibrations in the crystal formations around the room. "I have read the basic information about your species. Very new to space travel. Limited technological development. No natural weapons or armor. Quite primitive by galactic standards." Amy felt her face get hot, but tried to stay polite. "Yes, we are new to all this. I hope we can be good roommates." Resonance of Dawn crystals moved to her side of the room and began adjusting the crystal formations. "I will tolerate your presence as required by Academy regulations. Please try not to interfere with my harmonic meditations or contaminate the shared spaces with your biological processes." The rest of the evening was awkward. Amy unpacked her few belongings while her roommate filled the air with sounds that might have been music or conversation with other Vorthak elsewhere in the Academy. Amy tried to use the room's communication system to contact her family on Earth, but the time delay was too long and the connection kept cutting out. She lay in her bed that night listening to the strange sounds of an alien world. Through the transparent walls, she could see other students moving around the Academy grounds. Some flew, others walked on walls, and a few seemed to phase through solid objects. Amy felt very small and very human in a place where being human seemed to be the same as being primitive and useless. The next morning, Amy attended her first classes. Basic galactic history was taught by a professor who looked like a giant spider with too many eyes. The lesson covered wars and treaties between species that had been traveling between stars when humans were still using stone tools. Amy took notes, but felt lost most of the time. Mathematics of hyperspace navigation was even worse. The equations filled three-dimensional holographic displays and required thinking in ways that human brains were not designed for. Most of her classmates seemed to understand the concepts easily, while Amy struggled with the most basic ideas. But it was advanced tactical theory that really made Amy feel out of place. Professor Zethkar was a Nereid, with scars across his blue skin and eyes that had seen real combat. The classroom was filled with students from different species, all of whom seemed to have extensive knowledge of military history and strategy. "Today, we begin your final projects," Professor Zethkar announced in his flowing voice. "Each student will select a significant battle from galactic history and present an analysis of the tactics used. Your presentations will demonstrate understanding of strategic principles that apply across different environments and technologies." Students began discussing their choices immediately. The Chitauri student selected the Battle of the Seven Nebulae, where hive mind coordination had defeated a larger enemy force. A Luminian chose the Siege of the Dark Star, where energy-based weapons had proven superior to physical defenses. The Granite Collective representative picked a battle where defensive positions had worn down attackers over decades. Amy listened to the discussions and realized that every battle they mentioned involved advanced technology and species with natural abilities far beyond human capabilities. When Professor Zethkar asked for her choice, she hesitated. "I would like to study the Battle of Thermopylae," she said finally. The classroom went quiet. Professor Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on her with obvious confusion. "I am not familiar with this engagement. What species participated and what level of technology was involved? It was a battle fought by humans on Earth about 2,500 years ago. The technology was very basic. Swords, spears, shields, no space travel or energy weapons. Several students made sounds that might have been laughter. Resonance of dawn crystals. Vibrated in a way that clearly indicated amusement. You wish to study pre-space warfare, Professor Zethkar said slowly. Primitive combat with no relevance to modern tactical theory. Amy felt her face burning again, but stood her ground. Yes, sir. I think there might be lessons that still apply. The professor considered this for a long moment. Very well. Though, I fail to see how ancient primitive combat could provide insight into galactic warfare. I will allow this choice. Perhaps it will serve as an interesting contrast to more relevant military history. Amy spent the rest of the class period feeling the stares of her classmates. She could hear whispered conversations in languages she did not understand, but the tone made it clear they were discussing the strange human who wanted to study old battles with swords. After class, a Chitauri student approached her. Its compound eyes reflected her image dozens of times as it spoke. Human Amy Rodriguez, the collective finds your choice curious. How can study of pre-technological warfare benefit? Understanding of modern combat scenarios. Amy tried to explain about strategy and leadership and fighting against impossible odds, but the Chitauri just tilted its head in confusion before walking away to rejoin its group. That evening in her room, Amy began researching the Battle of Thermopylae. While resonance of dawn crystals created complex harmonic patterns that filled the air with sound. Amy read about King Leonidas and the 300 Spartans who held a mountain pass against impossible odds. She studied their tactics and their reasons for fighting. Amy stood in front of the advanced tactical theory class with her heart beating fast. Every student was staring at her with eyes that belonged to different species, but the feeling of being judged was the same everywhere. Professor Zethkar floated. Behind his desk, with his 4 arms crossed, waiting to see what the human could possibly teach about warfare. She activated the holographic display, and images of ancient Greece appeared in the air. Mountains, narrow passes, and soldiers in bronze armor filled the space above the students' heads. Several aliens made sounds that Amy had learned meant confusion or amusement. The Battle of Thermopylae happened in 480 BC on Earth, Amy began. The Persian Empire had over 100,000 soldiers, and they wanted to conquer Greece. The Greeks had only 7,000 men total, and only 300 of them were Spartans. Hive Node 7, the Chitauri student, raised one of its 4 arms. These numbers suggest immediate defeat for the smaller force. Why did they not retreat or surrender? Because they were fighting for their homeland and their way of life, Amy said. The Spartans chose a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, where the larger army could not use its numbers effectively. For 3 days they held the pass. She changed the display to show the geography of the battle. The narrow pass between mountains and sea created a bottleneck where only a few soldiers could fight at once. Several students leaned forward with interest as they began to understand the tactical advantages. The Persians had better weapons and more soldiers. But the Greeks used the terrain to make those advantages useless, Amy continued. They turned the enemy's strength into a weakness. Bright Flux Ascending, the Luminian student, spoke through its energy field. Interesting geographical manipulation, but the outcome was predetermined. The smaller force was eliminated. Yes, they died, Amy said. But their sacrifice gave the rest of Greece time to prepare. The Persian army was delayed and demoralized. Later, The Greeks won the war. Stone that endures, the massive granite collective representative spoke in its slow, deep voice. Death without victory serves no strategic purpose. This demonstrates primitive thinking. Amy felt her confidence starting to crack, but she thought about King Leonidas and his 300 warriors facing impossible odds. Sometimes winning is not about survival. Sometimes it is about showing others that resistance is possible even when everything seems hopeless. Professor Zethkar moved closer to the display. Explain the specific tactical innovations used in this engagement. Amy relaxed a little as she moved to more concrete details. The Greeks used their shields to form a wall called a phalanx. Each soldier protected himself and the man next to him. They could not be broken unless they chose to break. She showed how the formation worked, with each shield overlapping to create an unbreakable line. The Persians were used to fighting individuals or small groups. They had no way to deal with soldiers who fought as one unit. The class was paying attention now. Even resonance of dawn crystals had stopped her harmonic humming to focus on the presentation. The Greeks also used psychological warfare, Amy continued. When the Persian messenger demanded they surrender their weapons, King Leonidas said, "Come and take them." When they were told the Persian arrows would block out the sun, a Spartan warrior said, "Good, then we will fight in the shade." "Primitive posturing," muttered one of the Nereid students. "No," Amy said firmly. "It was about morale. The Greeks knew they would probably die, but they refused to show fear. That gave them strength and made their enemies doubt." She clicked to the final image. The monument that still stood at Thermopylae, thousands of years later. The inscription says, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie. They kept their promise to defend their home, no matter what it cost." The classroom was quiet when Amy finished. Professor Zethkar studied the holographic display with two of his eyes, while the other two watched Amy. "Your analysis focuses heavily on psychological factors and group cohesion," he said finally. "These elements are often overlooked in favor of technological advantages and numerical superiority." Hive Node 7 vibrated its wings. "The collective acknowledges tactical merit in the formation fighting, but questions the value of certain death." "That is because your species thinks differently," Amy replied. "Humans do not have hive minds or natural weapons or energy bodies. We survive by working together and refusing to give up, even when we should." Amy sat down, and the next student began presenting about a battle involving plasma cannons and faster-than-light travel. But she noticed several aliens glancing at her throughout the remaining presentations, as if seeing her differently than before. After class, Professor Zethkar announced the practical exercise. "You will work in mixed teams to plan a defense of this academy. Use all available resources and assume attackers with superior technology and numbers." Amy found herself assigned to a team with Kevin Martinez, another human exchange student she had barely spoken to before. Their teammates were Resonance of Dawn Crystals, Hive Node 7, and Stone that Endures. The team gathered in one of the study rooms to begin planning. Kevin was taller than Amy, with dark hair and serious eyes. He had been quiet during most classes, but Amy had noticed him paying attention to everything around him. "We should start by cataloging the Academy's defensive systems," Resonance of Dawn Crystals announced, her voice creating harmonics in the crystal formations around the room. "Energy shields, automated turrets, emergency barriers." "The collective agrees," said Hive Node 7. Priority scanning of all technological assets and defensive positions. Stone that endures spoke slowly. Structural analysis indicates optimal positions for withstanding siege conditions. Amy and Kevin looked at each other as their teammates immediately began discussing quantum field generators and molecular destabilization weapons. The technology was so far beyond Earth science that most of their suggestions sounded like magic. "What about the maintenance tunnels?" Kevin said quietly. Alien stopped talking and looked at him. "Clarify this proposal," requested Hive Node 7. Kevin pulled up the Academy blueprints on his portable device. "Every building has service corridors for repairs and maintenance. They connect all the major sections, but they are not covered by the main security systems." "Irrelevant," said Resonance of Dawn Crystals. "Modern warfare occurs at ranges where such passages provide no tactical advantage." "But what if the attackers get inside the main building?" Amy asked. "The tunnels would let defenders move around without being detected." Stone that endures considered this with its slow, patient manner. "Underground movement has historical precedent. In siege warfare." Kevin was studying the blueprints more carefully. "Look at this," he said, pointing to several locations. "The cafeteria has good sight lines and multiple exits. If we put defenders here and here, they could create crossfire zones." "Primitive thinking," said Hive Node 7. "Modern combat requires orbital bombardment protocols and gravitational field manipulation." Amy watched Kevin continue to examine the Academy layout. He was memorizing every corridor, every room, every possible position. It reminded her of something she had read about human soldiers in Earth's wars, how they studied terrain like their lives depended on it. "Why are you mapping everything so carefully?" she asked him. Kevin looked up from the blueprints. "My grandfather was in the military. He always said you should know your ground better than the enemy knows it. Just in case." "Just in case of what?" asked Brightflux Ascending, who had joined their group. "Just in case the advanced technology fails and you have to fight with what you have," Kevin said simply. The alien students exchanged what might have been confused looks. Their species had been using advanced technology for so long that the idea of it failing seemed impossible. Amy found herself thinking about her presentation earlier. The Greeks at Thermopylae had not won because they had better weapons or more soldiers. They had won their part of the battle because they understood their ground and worked together and refused to quit. She watched Kevin marking defensive positions and escape routes on the blueprints. He was thinking like those ancient warriors, preparing for a battle that would probably never happen, but might save lives if it did. "We should also check the laboratory sections," Amy suggested. "Chemistry labs have materials that could be useful." "For what purpose?" asked Stone. "That endures, making improvised weapons or tools. Sometimes the best solutions use simple materials in new ways." Resonance of Dawn Crystals vibrated with what Amy was learning meant disagreement. "Advanced defensive. Systems render such measures obsolete." But Amy noticed that Kevin was already making notes about the laboratory locations. He understood what she was thinking about, even though their alien teammates did not. The session continued with the other species discussing force field projections and quantum tunnel networks, while Amy and Kevin quietly mapped backup plans using maintenance corridors and improvised equipment. Their suggestions were politely dismissed as primitive thinking, but they kept planning anyway. When the meeting ended, Kevin approached Amy as they walked back to their dormitories. "Good presentation today," he said. "I liked how you explained why the Spartans fought even when they knew they would lose." Amy was studying the Academy blueprints with Kevin when the alarm started. The sound was unlike anything she had heard before, a deep, resonating tone that seemed to come from the walls themselves and made her bones vibrate. Around them, other students in the tactical planning room looked up from their work with expressions of confusion and growing concern. The holographic displays throughout the room suddenly flickered and changed to show Professor Zethkar's face. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by the focused intensity of someone who had seen real combat. "Attention all students," his voice echoed through the Academy's communication system. "This is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces have breached the planetary defense grid and are approaching our location. All students are to report to designated emergency shelters immediately." Amy felt her stomach drop as she watched the tactical display update with red markers showing incoming ships. Kevin was already on his feet, his training taking over as he grabbed their planning materials. "Void hunters," whispered Stone. "That endures," the massive rock being's voice carrying a tone Amy had never heard before. "Fear. The technology devourers have found us." Resonance of dawn crystals began vibrating at a frequency that hurt Amy's ears. "Impossible. The Academy's location is classified. Our defensive systems are impenetrable." "Apparently not," Kevin said grimly as he watched the display show more red markers appearing around the planet. "How long until they reach us?" Professor Zethkar's voice continued over the speakers. "Estimated time to surface contact is 8 minutes. The Void Hunters are known for their ability to corrupt and control technological systems. Primary defensive networks are already showing signs of infiltration." Amy watched in horror as the Academy's own defensive turrets began changing color on the tactical display from blue to red. The automated systems that were supposed to protect them were being turned against them. Hive Node 7's compound eyes reflected the emergency lights as it spoke with rapid clicks. "The collective has lost contact with our homeworld. Communication networks are compromised." Around the room, students from different species were reacting in ways Amy had never seen before. The Luminians were flickering frantically inside their containment suits. Several Nereid students had formed a circle and were making sounds like whales in distress. A group of Chitauri were trying to maintain formation but kept breaking apart. As panic spread through their collective consciousness, Kevin grabbed Amy's arm. "We need to move. Emergency shelters will be the first places they look for people to capture." "But Professor Zethkar said to go there," Amy protested. "Professor Zethkar is thinking like someone who fights normal enemies," Kevin replied. "The Void Hunters absorb technology and biological material. They want the students, not the building." Amy looked around at the chaos spreading through the room. Students were running in different directions, some toward the emergency shelters and others toward the exits. No one seemed to know what to do. "Listen to me," Kevin said loudly, his voice cutting through the noise. Several students stopped and looked at him. "The maintenance tunnels we mapped out earlier, they are not connected to the main computer system, so the Void Hunters cannot control them." Resonance of dawn crystals vibrated with disagreement. "Primitive passages provide no protection against advanced technology." "Advanced technology is what they use against us," Amy said, understanding Kevin's thinking. "But they might not expect us to use simple solutions." The building shuddered as something large impacted the outer walls. Through the transparent sections, Amy could see dark shapes moving across the Academy grounds. They looked like a mixture of machinery and living tissue, crawling and flowing rather than walking. "Decision time," Kevin announced. "Emergency shelters or maintenance tunnels." Stone that endures moved toward Kevin with its slow but determined gait. Military logic suggests avoiding predicted locations. This unit will follow human tactical assessment. Hive Node 7 hesitated, its collective programming conflicting with individual survival instincts. The collective is disrupted. Individual decisions may be required. More explosions shook the building. The lights flickered, and Amy could hear screaming from other parts of the academy. Whatever was happening outside was getting closer. Maintenance tunnel access point is 2 corridors down, Kevin said, pulling up the blueprints on his device. We move fast and quiet. Amy found herself taking charge of organizing the group as Kevin led the way. Resonance of dawn crystals, can you dim your light output so we are harder to see? Hive Node 7, try to stay calm and follow our lead. Stone that endures, you might need to squeeze through some tight spaces. As they moved through the corridors, Amy could see other groups of students running toward the official emergency shelters. Part of her wondered if they were making a mistake by going against the evacuation procedures, but the sounds of combat were getting closer, and she trusted Kevin's instincts. They reached the maintenance access panel just as the building's power grid flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast red shadows in the hallways, and Amy could hear the sound of metal being torn apart somewhere above them. Kevin worked quickly to open the access panel while Amy watched the corridor for threats. Behind them, their alien teammates huddled together in a way that reminded Amy how young and scared they all were, despite being from species with thousands of years of galactic experience. Got it, Kevin said as the panel slid open. Everyone, in. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dark, designed for repair robots rather than students. Stone that endures had to compress its rocky form to fit, while resonance of dawn crystals dimmed her light until she was barely visible. They crawled through the tunnel system using Kevin's mapped routes. Amy could hear sounds of battle echoing through the walls around them. Explosions, energy weapons firing, and worse sounds that might have been students screaming. "Where are we going?" whispered Hive Node 7. "The laboratory section," Kevin replied quietly. "If we are going to fight these things, we need weapons." "Fight them." Resonance of dawn crystals pulsed with shock. "We are students, not warriors." Amy thought about her presentation on the Battle of Thermopylae. Sometimes you do not get to choose. Sometimes the battle comes to you. They emerged from the tunnel system in the chemistry laboratory section. The labs were empty, but the equipment was still functional. Amy looked at the various chemicals and materials available while Kevin checked the corridor for threats. "What exactly are we planning to do?" asked Stone that endures. Amy picked up a container of concentrated acid and another of metal shavings. "We are going to do what humans do best. We are going to improvise." Kevin was examining the laboratory's layout when more explosions echoed through the building. "They are getting closer. Whatever we do, we need to do it fast." Amy began mixing chemicals while explaining her plan. Basic explosive devices using laboratory materials, nothing fancy but effective enough to damage their equipment. "This is insane," said Resonance of Dawn Crystals. "We should be hiding, not preparing to attack beings that destroy entire civilizations." "Hiding does not work when they are hunting you," Kevin replied as he helped Amy assemble their improvised weapons. "Better to hurt them before they hurt us." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the main corridor. Heavy, mechanical steps mixed with something that sounded like wet sliding. Amy felt her hands shake as she finished preparing the last explosive device. "They are here," Kevin whispered. Through the laboratory windows, Amy could see shapes moving in the hallway. The Void Hunters looked like nightmares made real, combining the worst aspects of machines and living creatures. metallic. Tentacles writhed from bodies that pulsed with stolen biological matter. Their eyes glowed with the light of absorbed technology. One of them paused at the laboratory door, and Amy held her breath. Its head turned toward their hiding spot behind the lab benches, as if it could sense their presence. Kevin signaled for everyone to stay still and quiet. Amy watched the creature's mechanical parts click and whir as it scanned the room. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, it moved on down the corridor. "Now what?" whispered Hive Node 7, Amy. Looked at their small group of frightened students hiding in a chemistry lab while monsters hunted through their school. She thought about King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans facing the massive Persian army. Sometimes you fought not because you could win, but because fighting was the right thing to do. Now we find the other students and we stop running, she said, quietly. It is time to hold the line. Kevin nodded with understanding. Stone that endures rumbled its agreement. Even resonance of dawn crystals stopped protesting, though her light patterns showed fear and uncertainty. Amy gathered their improvised weapons and checked Kevin's map for the best route to reach other student groups. Outside the laboratory, the sounds of the Void Hunter attack continued. But for the first time since the alarm started, Amy felt something other than fear. She felt ready to fight. The battle for Zenthera Academy was about to begin, and a small group of students armed with chemistry lab supplies was going to make their stand. Amy thought the ancient Spartans would have understood completely. Kevin moved through the maintenance tunnels with a confidence that surprised even Amy. His earlier quiet observation had transformed into decisive leadership as he guided their small group toward the sounds of other students in trouble. Amy followed, close behind, carrying the improvised explosives they had made from laboratory chemicals. "There," Kevin whispered, pointing to a ventilation grate that showed light from the main corridor below. Through the opening, they could see a group of first-year students trapped in an alcove, while two void hunters prowled outside their hiding spot. The trapped students included several young Nereids, a few Chitauri barely old enough to be away from, their hive, and two other humans Amy recognized from the exchange program. Lisa Chang was trying to treat a wounded Luminian student while Jake Thompson attempted to keep the group calm and quiet. "We cannot reach them without being seen," said Hive Node 7, its compound eyes reflecting the dim light in the tunnel. Kevin studied the layout below them. "We do not need to reach them. We need to draw the hunters away." Amy understood immediately. "A distraction. Make noise somewhere else and lead them away from the students." "Precisely," Kevin said. "But it has to be more than just noise. We need to make them think we are a threat worth chasing." Stone that endures spoke in its slow, deep voice. "This unit can provide significant noise and apparent threat level. Resonance of dawn crystals pulsed with nervous energy. This plan requires deliberate exposure to extreme danger." "Yes," Kevin said simply. "That is exactly what it requires." Amy felt her heart racing, but she knew they had no choice. "How do we do this?" Kevin outlined the plan quickly. They would use the maintenance tunnels to get behind the Void Hunters, then create an explosion that would damage one of them and force both to chase their group instead of hunting the trapped students. "Once we start this, there is no going back," Kevin warned. "We will have to keep moving and fighting until either they are destroyed or we are." Amy thought about the Spartans at Thermopylae making their choice to stand and fight knowing they would not survive. "Then we better make sure we are the ones still standing at the end." They moved through the tunnel system until they were positioned behind the two Void Hunters. Amy could see the creatures more clearly now. Their bodies were a horrible mixture of stolen technology and biological parts taken from different species. One had what looked like Chitauri limbs grafted onto a metallic torso. The other had crystalline structures that might have once belonged to a Vorthak protruding from its head. Kevin signaled for everyone to get ready. Amy armed one of her chemical explosives and prepared to throw it. Stone that Endures positioned itself to charge forward after the explosion. Hive Node 7 and Resonance of Dawn crystals prepared to follow their lead. "Now," Kevin whispered. Amy threw the explosive device at the nearest Void Hunter. The chemical reaction created a bright flash and a loud bang that echoed through the corridor. The creature spun around with a screech of damaged metal and organic pain. Stone that Endures burst from the maintenance tunnel opening like a living avalanche, its massive form slamming into the wounded Void Hunter and driving it backward. Resonance of Dawn crystals emerged behind the rock being, her light patterns flashing in frequencies that seemed to disrupt the hunter's sensory equipment. "This way," Kevin shouted to the trapped students below. "Get to the emergency stairs." Lisa, Chang, and Jake Thompson immediately began moving their group of rescued students toward the escape route. Amy watched with relief as the young aliens followed the two humans without question, trusting them to know the way to safety. But the second Void Hunter was turning toward Kevin's group with obvious hostile intent. Its mechanical parts whirred and clicked as it scanned them with sensors that glowed like angry red eyes. "Target acquired," it spoke in a voice that combined multiple stolen vocal systems. "Human specimens detected. High priority for absorption and analysis." Amy threw another explosive at the creature, but it moved faster than she expected, avoiding the worst of the blast. The explosion damaged its outer armor, but did not stop it from advancing. Kevin grabbed Amy's arm. "Move! Back to the tunnels!" They retreated through the maintenance system with the Void Hunter pursuing them. Its mechanical tentacles tore at the tunnel openings as it tried to follow, but its bulk was too large to fit inside the narrow spaces. "It cannot follow us in here," said Hive Node 7 with relief. "No, but it can wait for us to come out," Kevin replied grimly. "And now it knows we are here." Amy could hear the creature moving through the corridors above them, tracking their progress through the tunnel system. "We saved those students, but now we are trapped." "Not trapped," Kevin said with determination. "We just need to keep moving and help more people." They continued through the tunnels, using Amy's explosives to attack other Void Hunters when they found more trapped students. Each rescue operation was dangerous, but Kevin's tactical thinking and Amy's improvised weapons proved effective against enemies who were used to fighting with advanced technology. At the third rescue, they found Professor Zethkar defending a group of injured students in the medical bay. The Nereid warrior was wounded but still fighting, using a damaged energy weapon to hold off two Void Hunters. "Professor," Amy called through the tunnel opening. "We can help." Zethkar looked up with surprise. "Students should be in emergency shelters, not engaging hostile forces." "Emergency shelters are compromised," Kevin replied as he prepared to emerge from the tunnel. "We need to work together." Amy coordinated their attack while Kevin led Stone that Endures in a frontal assault. This time, Hive Node 7 surprised everyone by using its collective training to predict the hunter's movements, while Resonance of Dawn crystals created harmonic disruptions that interfered with their coordination. The combined assault from students and professor destroyed both Void Hunters, though not without cost. Several students were seriously injured, and their supply of chemical explosives was running low. How many more of these creatures are in the academy? Amy asked Professor Zethkar as Lisa Chang worked to treat the wounded. Sensor readings indicated at least 12 individual units before communications were disrupted, the professor replied. But they may have called for reinforcements. Jake Thompson looked up from helping with the injured students. We cannot keep fighting them one at a time. We need a better plan. Amy looked around at their growing group of rescued students. They had humans, Nereids, Chitauri, Vorthok, Luminians, and representatives from the Granite Collective. Each species had different abilities and ways of thinking. What if we stop fighting them separately? She said slowly. What if we work together like we never have before? Kevin understood what she was thinking. Combine our different abilities into something the Void Hunters cannot counter. Professor Zethkar considered this with his tactical mind. Theoretically possible, but coordination between species has always been limited by communication and cultural barriers. Then we better learn to work together fast, Amy said, as the sound of more Void Hunters echoed through the corridors. Because they are coming for all of us. Amy thought about her presentation on the Battle of Thermopylae. The Greeks had won not because they were stronger individually, but because they fought as one unit. Now she had to figure out how to make students from 12 different species fight like one army. The real battle for Zenthara Academy was about to begin, and everything would depend on whether beings from across the galaxy could learn to trust each other the way those ancient human warriors had trusted their shield brothers. Amy looked at Kevin and saw the same determination in his eyes that she felt in her heart. They were no longer just human exchange students. They were leaders in a fight for survival, and they would not let their friends down. The Void Hunters were about to learn what happened when you threatened something that humans cared about. Amy stood in the main hall of Zenthara Academy, surrounded by students from 12 different species, all looking to her for answers she did not have. The building shook again as more Void Hunters broke through the outer defenses, and she could hear the sound of metal being torn apart getting closer. Kevin was coordinating defensive positions using furniture and laboratory equipment, while Lisa Chang treated wounded students with medical supplies they had gathered from various departments. Jake Thompson worked with the communication systems, trying to reach the Galactic Defense Forces through the interference caused by the Void Hunter technology. But it was Professor Zethkar's condition that worried Amy the most. The Nereid warrior had fought bravely to protect his students, but the injuries he sustained were severe. His blue skin was pale and his movements were slow. When another wave of attacks began, he might not be able to continue fighting. Structural analysis indicates this position cannot be held indefinitely, rumbled Stone that endures. Enemy forces are adapting to our defensive strategies. Hive Node 7 clicked its mandibles nervously. The collective consciousness is fragmented. Individual decision-making remains difficult under stress conditions. Amy watched as resonance of dawn crystals tried to coordinate with other Vorthak students through harmonic communication, but their crystal formations were cracked from the battle and the signals kept breaking apart. We need a new plan, Kevin said as he joined Amy near the center of the hall. Our improvised weapons are almost gone, and they are bringing more hunters. Through the transparent walls, Amy could see the dark shapes of additional Void Hunter ships landing on the Academy grounds. Their biomechanical forms moved with horrible purpose as they surrounded the building. Soon there would be too many to fight. Professor Zethkar, Amy called to the injured Nereid. What do you know about Void Hunter weaknesses? The professor struggled to focus through his pain. They absorb technology and biological material to strengthen themselves. No known vulnerabilities to conventional weapons. Their only limitation is processing capacity for absorbed information. Amy felt an idea forming in her mind. Processing capacity. What happens if they absorb too much information at once? Theoretical overload could cause system failure, Zethkar replied. But no practical method exists to force such overload. Amy looked around at the diverse group of students surrounding her. Each species had thousands of years of cultural knowledge, scientific understanding, and unique ways of thinking. What if we give them everything we know all at once? Kevin understood immediately. Information warfare. Overwhelm their systems with data. How? Asked Bright Flux Ascending, the Luminian student flickering with nervous energy inside its containment suit. Void hunters absorb through physical contact, not data transmission. Amy pointed to the Academy's central communication array, damaged but still partially functional. We broadcast everything. Every song, every story, every piece of knowledge from every species here. All of it at the same time. Lisa Chang looked up from treating a wounded Chitauri student. That would require everyone to share their most personal, cultural memories. Some species consider that impossible. Impossible is what we are facing anyway, Amy replied. The question is whether we trust each other enough to try. The building shuddered again as void hunters began breaking through. The main entrance. Amy could see their mechanical tentacles tearing at the reinforced doors, while their biomechanical bodies pulsed with absorbed energy from the Academy's defensive systems. Decision time, Kevin announced as he prepared their last few explosive devices. Either we try Amy's plan or we fight them until they overwhelm us. Stone that endures moved toward the communication array with its steady determination. This unit will share Granite Collective historical records. Survival requires cooperation. Resonance of dawn crystals vibrated with uncertainty, but then her light patterns began showing resolution. Vorthak harmonic knowledge will be transmitted. Unity serves preservation. One by one, the students from different species moved toward the communication system. Hive Node 7 overcame its collective programming to make an individual choice. The Luminian students prepared to share their energy-based consciousness patterns. Even the wounded Nereid students offered their aquatic cultural memories. Amy worked frantically with Jake Thompson to modify the communication array so it could handle the massive data transmission. The system was not designed for this kind of broadcast, but they used their human talent for improvisation to make it work. Everyone needs to focus on their most important memories at the same time, Amy explained. Personal experiences, cultural knowledge, emotional connections, everything that makes your species unique. The main doors exploded inward, and void hunters poured into the hall. Their mechanical parts clicked and whirred as they scanned the gathered students with obvious hunger. Amy could see the stolen biological components from dozens of species grafted onto their bodies. Now! Amy shouted. The communication array activated, and suddenly the air filled with the combined thoughts and memories of beings from across the galaxy. Vorthak harmonic mathematics mixed with Chitauri collective consciousness patterns. Granite. Collective geological memories combined with Nereid aquatic songs. Luminian energy theories merged with human emotional stories. The effect on the void hunters was immediate and dramatic. Their mechanical systems began sparking as they tried to process the massive data influx. The biomechanical creatures stumbled and writhed as conflicting information overloaded their absorption capabilities. Amy felt the mental connection herself. experiencing fragments of alien thoughts and memories that her human brain was never designed to handle. She sensed Kevin's determination, Lisa's compassion, Jake's technical curiosity, but she also felt the deep geological patience of stone that endures, the harmonic beauty of resonance of dawn crystal's music, and the collective unity that drove Hive Node 7. For a moment that seemed to last forever, every being in the hall was connected in a way that transcended species barriers. Amy understood what it felt like to think with a hive mind, to communicate through crystal harmonics, to exist as pure energy. And she felt the alien students experiencing human emotions like individual determination, personal sacrifice, and the refusal to abandon friends. The Void Hunters shrieked with electronic and organic voices as their systems crashed. They had evolved to absorb and control technology and biological material, but they could not process the raw complexity of conscious thought from so many different types of minds simultaneously. One by one, the biomechanical creatures collapsed as their absorption systems overloaded. Their stolen components began separating as the unifying force that held them together failed. Within minutes, the threat that had seemed unstoppable was reduced to scattered mechanical parts and confused biological fragments. Amy felt the mental connection fading as the communication array overloaded and shut down. She looked around at the other students, all of whom seemed changed by the experience of truly understanding each other for the first time. "Is it over?" asked Hive Node 7. Its voice carrying a new quality that suggested individual personality. Emerging from collective programming, Kevin checked his monitoring equipment. "The ships outside are retreating. Whatever we did, it affected all of them." Professor Zethkar struggled to stand, his injuries still severe but his expression showing amazement. "In 40 years of teaching tactical theory, I have never witnessed anything like this. You turned the enemy's greatest strength into their fatal weakness." Amy helped support the wounded professor while Lisa continued her medical work. "We just did what humans do when everything seems hopeless. We refused to give up and we worked together." Jake Thompson looked up from the damaged communication array. "The Galactic Defense Forces are finally getting through. They want to know what happened here." "Tell them a group of students learned to fight as one army," Amy said. "Just like the Spartans at Thermopylae. Resonance of dawn." Crystals approached Amy, her light patterns showing respect and understanding. "Your species possesses capabilities that cannot be measured by technological advancement. The human factor is not primitive thinking. It is evolutionary advantage." Over the following hours, as rescue ships arrived and the academy was secured, Amy found herself surrounded by students from across the galaxy who wanted to understand how humans thought about warfare and cooperation. The species that had dismissed her presentation about ancient battles now asked detailed questions about human military history and leadership principles. Professor Zethkar requested permission to add human tactical philosophy to the Academy's required curriculum. "We have studied technology and strategy for millennia," he told Amy as medical teams treated his injuries. "But you have taught us that the most powerful weapon is the ability to unite different minds toward a common purpose." Amy looked out at the alien landscape where rescue teams were cleaning up the remains of the Void Hunter attack. Students from 12 different species worked together to help the wounded and repair the damage. The barriers between them had not disappeared completely, but something fundamental had changed.